Hey guys, how's it going? I'm back here with another video, and this is the 11th episode of the series where I teach you guys how to build a full stack application using React, Node, and MySQL. And in this video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to add some other functionalities that we need in a full stack app, such as, for example, logging out from our application, which currently we're able to log in, but we're not able to log out. If we want to log out, we basically have to remove our token and update our state. Which is something that I wouldn't want to do every single time I wanted to log out. And also, I want to have some visual representation or visual confirmation here of which user is logged in. And I'm going to show you guys these two functionalities, and if the video is still not long enough, or if I still have a little bit of time left, I might also add the functionality of, for example, deleting a comment if you were the person who commented, right? So that's basically it. This video will be a little bit shorter than the other ones because I'm still during my final seasons. Tomorrow is my last final, so I'm really excited for that. I'll be free for a long time, so yeah, that's basically it. So let's get into the tutorial. If you want to be able to log out, it's actually going to be pretty simple. We need to just create a button somewhere in our application, which will only appear if we are logged in, right? And you can see that how we determine if we're logged in or not is based on this context state called auth state. And over here in our navbar, we're basically just asking if we're not, if auth state is equal to false, then we want to show the links to login and registration. And basically that is important because we're going to use this kind of logic to be able to also create another link or button in this case that will represent the logout button. So we have to think, when do we want to display this logout button? Well, we only want to display it when the user is already logged in, and this right here is only asking it's actually the opposite. It's asking if the user is not logged in, then show these two links, the login and registration links. And we actually need to write some sort of logic that is going to take into account the case in which it is logged in, right? So to do that, all we have to do is we need to change this to a question mark and kind of just add an else statement down here. Because what we're doing is we're just asking if we're not logged in, then we want to show login and registration. But if we are logged in, then we want to show whatever we put over here, which is just going to be a beautiful button. Oh, I wrote button wrong. It's going to say something like logout. So this is basically the logic. We can see that right now the button doesn't show, and the reason why we're not just putting the button outside similar to this too is because this too will appear even if you're logged in or not, but the button we only want it to appear if we are already logged in, and you can see it doesn't appear in our screen. But if I come over here and I log in with my account, it should it should appear, right? So let's see. Yeah, it appears over here. Obviously, it looks ugly, it looks horrible, but again, I'm gonna fix the UI and fix the appearance of it later on. The only small thing that just annoys me a bit is just the size. So just really quick here, this won't be a CSS tutorial. I'll just come here to the navbar and just change the button on the navbar really quick, just to have a smaller size, like a width of, I don't know, 150 pixels and a height of like, I don't know, 40 pixels, and then also add a cursor to be pointer. So this is the only changes I'm gonna make in CSS because I don't want to spend time writing CSS. And all this does is it decreases the button size a bit, and now when I hover it, it kind of gives me this effect, which it's a pet peeve that I have. I really like to see buttons with this. So basically we now have this button which doesn't do anything when we click on it, but we want to add some sort of functionality that logs out the user, right? So to do that, all we have to do is we have to clear the token from the session storage, and at the same time we want to be able to change our context state, which is auth state, right? So technically we can write that logic inside of here, and it doesn't matter that much where we put this function. I'm going to put in the app.js, which is something that I usually don't like, putting functions inside of the kind of like the top layer of application. But in this case, it won't matter that much. So I'll just come over here and say const logout, just create a function that will be called whenever we click on that button. And let's just come over here and pass an on click to this function, to this button, and just say that whenever we click on it, we want to call the logout function. And on this function, primarily, we want to be able to call the session storage, and then you can see that there's a function inside of session storage called remove item, which if we call this function and we pass a key over here, it's going to remove whatever element is inside of the session storage that includes that key. So in our session storage, whatever holds our token is called an access token. So we can just come over here and say that we want to remove the access token, and that's not this is not the whole logic, because we need to take into account our state as well, because we might remove the token, but remember, it won't change, it won't appear here in our screen any changes. If we log out, we want to be able to see the login button again, right? So to make that work, all we have to do is we have to say that set auth state now is false, so we're not logged in anymore. So now that we have this done, you can see that we are logged in. I can refresh the page many times. We are logged in. And if I want to log out, all I have to do is click over here. And now you can see the buttons for login and registration appear. And in our inspect, if we go to application, okay, it should have deleted this. So let me take a look to see why it didn't delete. Did I write this wrong? Access token. No, I didn't write it wrong. So, oh, wait. Okay, completely dumb. I call this session storage. It should be local storage. Sorry about that. Let's just refresh our page and click on logout. Now you should see that in our inspect, we have our session storage, our local storage, sorry, without any items. So that's good. It means our logout functionality is working perfectly, and we're able to log out from our application. Now what I want to show you guys is how can we have some sort of visual confirmation that the user logged in, because we just log in and we don't know which user is logged in. There's no like profile button, which obviously if we want to add a profile page, we can do that later on in the series. But what I'm thinking is I just want to for now show the user name over here. And that's important because, again, where are we going to get that username, right? When we log in, and I'll come over here to the login component, you see that all we get back is we get our access token, and we just set the auth state, right? We're not getting anything back. So the reason why this is important is because the only way that we can get which user is logged in is based on the request that we created last episode. And I'm going to close this just so you guys can see. On our server, we created inside of, I guess, users, yeah, we created an endpoint called auth. And this endpoint is really important because whenever we call this, we get information about the user, right? We get information about whoever is logged in, including if the user is logged in, right? Because it validates, it goes through the middleware and validates our token to see if we have a valid token. So you can see down here, we return as the response the user. So technically, we are in our front end, we're getting information about the user. So we just need to use that information that we receive, and that information we get it inside of the app.js over here. When we make this request, we get this data from our response. So previously, we've been using set auth state as just a simple boolean, but we can change that. Now it's going to be an object containing some pieces of information, including if we are a status field, which basically represents if we're logged in or not. So what we can do is we can come over here, create an object, and for the auth state, it will include a username, which initially will be empty. It will include an ID, which initially will be just a 0, and it will also include a status. And basically, status will be a boolean representing if we're logged in or not. ID will be the user ID, and username will be the user username. So we're just storing that information that we get back from the response from the request that we make to validate our token. So now, if we want to update this, all we have to do is we have to pass this object inside of here, instead of just a true or false statement. And if you recall in this request that we made over here. First, we're asking if there's any errors. If there's any errors, we're just saying that the user is logged off. It's like not logged in. And if there isn't any errors, then we set the login status to be equal to true. So what we do is we just paste this over here. And over here, instead of just setting username to be an empty string, ID to be 0, and status to be false, we set status to be true because we are logged in. And then we use the response.data to get the username, because if you recall, we're returning over here in this request, we're returning the user, and user from our middleware is an object containing the username and the ID, and this is the data, the payload that we passed in the token. So now we can just come over here and say response.data.username, and that should be good enough for just setting our username to be something that we return from the token. And then for ID, it will be the same. It will be response.data.id. And now you might be asking, okay, but what do we do with this over here? Because this is just false. This was an error. We don't have any username. We don't have any ID or anything like that. So technically, there's many ways of doing this. What I'll do is I'll just come over here and I'll destructure this in the sense that I only want to change the status of our object, right? So we want to change the state, which is an object, but we only want to change a single field of that object. How exactly do we do this in React? Because with hooks, it's a bit weird, right? So to do that, all you do is you destructure the object by doing something like 3 dots and then saying the name of the object, which is auth state, and then you put a comma, and then you just put the new field that you want to change. So we just want to change status and make it equal to false. And what this now means is we're grabbing the auth state and we're setting it equal to the auth state, but we're changing one field called status to be equal to false. So if we had a username and an ID, it will keep them the same and only change the status. We're going to be using the same piece of logic in our logout function over here. We're just going to set it equal to false as well, but we don't want to change anything else. And yeah, that's basically it, right? Now the question that we make here in our return statement, instead of being is auth state equal to true, it's if auth state equal to false, we just ask is auth state dot status equal to false, because that's the field that represents if we're logged in or not. Now there are some stuff that we need to take into account, and one of those things is right now if we, and I'll just try to display it in the screen so you guys can see that we actually get the username. So I'll just come over here and say something like auth state dot username, and I'll just display it as an h1 tag so you guys see it. We're getting the correct information. That's definitely true. Refresh the page. I'm not logged in. So let me just come here and say PedroTech and put my password. You'll see that if I refresh my page over here, we have PedroTech beautifully written over here. So it is keeping track of the username and we have access to it. However, there's an issue, and I guess you guys saw it, right? When I log in, it won't appear. And again, it keeps PedroTech even if I log out. So the reason why this happens is because with the when we go to our logout function, we actually need to clear everything. And we need to clear everything because if we don't clear the values for our username and ID, we just remember those that were there before. So for this case specifically, we want to be able to clear this value. So I'm just going to copy and paste this over here, and this should be working. I forgot to put a curly brace over here, so I'll have to delete all of this parentheses that it automatically created. So this is the basic idea, right? But to fix the login, which you guys realize that when I log in, it actually doesn't automatically show our username. The reason why that happens is because if we go to our login component over here, we're just setting auth state equal to true. So that's already not working because auth state now is an object. But at the same time, we're not, in this request, we're not receiving the username, right? We want to be able to do something like this. We want to be able to say username is equal to something that we get from the request, then ID is equal to something that we get from the request, and then at the end we just set status to be equal to true, right? Because we're now logged in. All we have right now is being able to set status to true. But we don't have a username in the ID because in the login request that we created, the login route, it doesn't return any users. It only returns the token, which makes sense, right? But we want to change that. In our login request over here, we're only returning the token, but instead, we're going to return some pieces of information as well. Might want to return here. So I'll just say, I'll pass an object and return an object with a token. Then I also want to return a username like this. And then I also want to return, so I'll just say username and then just pass the username from the user that we're getting from here. And then I want to pass the ID. And the ID will be, we're going to get it directly from the user. In the login request, we find the user from the database, and we just grab it ID by saying user.id, right? Because this is the same user. I could have said user.username over here because we're just comparing both users, as you can see, but it doesn't really make any difference. If you guys have any doubts on this, just leave a comment down below. I answer every single comment. But basically, over here, we're just returning our token, our username, and our ID. So now that we have this, we can just come here to our login, and instead of setting our access token to be response.data, now we have many different fields in our response. So we have to say response.data.token for the access token, and for the username, I can just say response.data.username. And for the ID, same thing, response.data.id. And you guys see now, if I log in, if I come over here and say PedroTech, and then just come over here and say password 123, you'll see that I log in and everything immediately shows in our screen. And if I want to log out, it works as well. So it is perfect. It's working perfectly. We're now able to log in and log out, and there's a beautiful like confirmation of which user is logged in. Obviously, the UI doesn't look good, but again, when you look at this code, if you want to check out the code, it will be in the description. There'll probably be some CSS changes that I make after the video, so just check out the code. It is in the description. Now, this video is about 20 minutes long. I'll just try to sneak in like a few other functionalities, one of them including being able to delete a comment that you've made, right? Because that's something that you might want to do. If you wrote something that is weird and you don't want to be in the internet, you might want to delete it. So how exactly do you do that? Well, technically, all we have to do is we have to add a delete route in our comments route over here. So a delete endpoint. And this endpoint will need to take into account the user who commented. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over here and say router.delete inside of our comments route. And let's just pass again the empty slash because it doesn't really matter since we're just technically like just deleting something. However, we need to know the ID of the comment, right? And that kind of makes sense because we need to know which user is commenting. So what we do is we come over here and we just say, okay, I want to grab the comment ID as the parameters. We need to pass this in the request. And then for this, what we do is we also want at the same time to validate the token. And the reason for that is because we won't allow a user to delete a comment if they aren't the owners of that comment, right? It makes sense, right? So we need to pass this because we're gonna make some kind of checks inside of here that will check to see if the user deleting it, the user who is currently logged in, the user which is registered in the token, is the same user who created this comment based on the comment ID that we pass over here. And at the end, we just again make this into a function. So I'll pass async because it's gonna be asynchronous. Did I wrote async wrong? No, I just didn't finish this. So I'll say res, and then make this into a function. And over here, we want to first get the comment ID from rec.params.comment ID. And now, the reason why we need this comment ID is because if you look at our table in MySQL Workbench, you see that each comment has a different ID. So what we're going to do is we're just going to pass that ID for each comment inside of here and just use that as the identifier to which comment we want to delete. So what we do is we're going to come over here and we're going to say we just want to we're going to use Sequelize. We're going to use the comments how can I say, the comments models. And basically in Sequelize, if you want to delete something from a table, all you have to do is you have to say the table's model dot destroy. That's the name of the function. And then you can pass over here some sort of identifier. So I'm going to say where, and then we pass like a function, and then we say where ID is equal to comment ID. So we're just saying inside of the comments table, I want to destroy the field, the row which has an element with the ID equal to the comment ID that we're passing over here. And that makes sense, right? We're just deleting, if we want to delete this comment, we just delete the comment with the ID number 3. And this works fine. However, we want to be able to identify which user is currently, how can I say, currently trying to delete this. And there are many ways of doing this. We can do this in the backend. We can validate this in the backend. However, since I want to keep the standardized version of any kind of HTTP request, to do that in the backend, I would need to pass the data. For example, the user who's currently in the front end, I would have to pass that information to the backend, and that would make more sense if I pass some sort of body. And I don't want to pass a body on a delete request because despite it being allowed, it's not the standard. You usually, on a delete request, you usually just pass an ID and delete some item in a database based on that ID. So that's what I want to do. So in theory, I want to come here to our posts component, and inside of here, we've got to find a way to validate which user is currently navigating through the project to see and only show the delete button to the comments which those users made, right? So how can we do that? Well, if you come over here, you'll see that in each post there's a bunch of comments, and we're gonna put the button right over here to the left to each comment that you can delete. So what we can do is we can come here to the list of comments, which is where we list each comment. And each comment has a variable called comment, which contains the information about the comment, including the username. So technically, I can just come over here and at the end add a button, which is going to be the delete button. So actually, I'll just put an X because that represents delete, right? And you'll see that right now every single comment gets a delete button, but that's not going to happen, and you guys will see why. Because we can basically just ask over here. We have access to which user is logged in, right? Because auth state is now populated by the user, the username of the user who's logged in. So what we can do is we can just ask, okay, we only want to show the delete button if the auth state. Oh, I don't even know if I'm getting the state over here. Yeah, I'm not getting the state in this component. So we need to do that. We need to do the same thing we did with the login, which is we need to grab the auth context from the top, from the context page that we created, and just paste it over here as an import. And then just destructure the auth state variable using the use context hook. I'm just copying and pasting because we already did this in the previous episode. So over here, instead of getting the auth state, the set auth state function, I'll just grab the auth state variable in itself, because now we can access which user is logged in by grabbing the username inside of this state, right? So I'll just come over here and say, okay, we only want to show the delete button if auth state dot username. So if the username that is logged in is equal to the username that wrote this comment. So if I say comment.username, that's representing the user who wrote the comment. So that kind of makes sense, right? And if this is true, I want to display this button. So if you come over here, it says use context is not defined because we didn't import use context from React. I'll just come over here and say use context, and now it should be working. Now you can see that it should be displaying. It isn't, and I'll see why this is happening. Oh, this is happening because I didn't log in. So I'll just log in right now as PedroTech, and let's say password 123, and you see that if I go to some sort of page, maybe this one, okay, all comments I made them. So I'll actually log in with a new account and write a new comment just so you guys can see. Let me create an account called Michael, and the password will be Scott, and I'll register. So I just registered and I didn't redirect. I need to fix that later, but basically we're now created an account called Michael Scott, and I'll log in with this account, Michael Scott, and you see I'm logged in as Michael, so I'll just write here a comment. Hey, what's up? So I just wrote a new comment, and you see that this is the only comment which has the delete button, which is amazing, right? It means that we're not able to delete comments that aren't ours. And if I log into the PedroTech account like this, it won't show for this one. It will only show the delete button for the comments that aren't the one written by Michael, right? So this is kind of the idea. And now all we have to do is we just need to be able to call this request from our frontend and pass the comment ID. So to do that, it's actually pretty simple. We're going to close this. We're not dealing with the backend anymore. We're just dealing with the frontend. And instead of the posts component, we're going to come over here to this button, which is the delete button, and we're going to pass in onClick functionality, onClick property, which calls a function which is going to be called delete comment. We haven't created this function yet, but we're going to do it immediately. So over here at the top, let's just create this comment, this function right below the add comment function, right over here, and let's just call it delete comment. And this function actually will take a variable. The reason why it would take a variable is because, if you recall, we need to pass the comment ID to the request. So how do we get that comment ID? Well, the only way to do it is because there's many comments, right? So the function should be making a request with a different ID depending on which comment you clicked, right? So the only access we have to that ID is through this comment variable over here that is mapping through each list. So instead of just calling directly the delete comment function, we need to pass the ID for that specific comment as an argument to the delete comment function. So I'll just come over here and pass the comment.id and say that the delete comment function takes an ID as its argument, right? And then inside of here, all I do is I just make an access request, and it's going to be a delete request, and it's going to be towards the same server that we've been making our requests to, and it's going to be the same thing because this is a delete request. And the only difference is that at the end over here, we need to pass the ID for the comment. So since we want to pass the JavaScript variable inside of this string, we are going to change this quotes to backticks like this. And now we can just insert JavaScript variables by adding a money sign and a curly braces. And now we just say ID, and this should be making a request to the endpoint with ID at the end. So this is the basic idea, right? And now after this is done, we also need to pass, as you recall, the headers to be able to pass our access token as part of our request. So that's going to be simple. All we do is we come over here and we pass an object containing headers, and inside of this headers will only have one variable, which is an access token, and this access token will be passed by the local storage. Something that we've been doing with the other requests as well. Every request that we want to be validated, which we want to be authenticated and pass through the validation token, we will need to do the same thing. So I'll just come over here and say access token, and now we're passing our request correctly. And at the end, after this request is done, we just want to delete the token, right? So we'll just for now leave it like this. I'll just alert a message saying token deleted, and you guys will see what happens. So I'll say token deleted, and let's see if this is working. What I imagine is if I click on a comment, it should appear the message token deleted in our screen, but it should technically only remove from our page when I refresh my page, because then it will make another request to our database, and now the comment won't be in our database anymore. So let's test this. Let's delete I don't know, this one over here, this what's up comment. I'll click on this and no message appeared, but let's refresh our page, and yeah, the what's up comment disappeared, but no message appeared on our screen, which I think it's weird, but that's fine. I didn't really want to read the message anyways. It means it's working. We're deleting comments. I'm being able to delete this one, for example. If I click on it and I refresh my page, it's not here anymore. But now we want to write some piece of logic that is going to be able to delete this automatically, right? Because we don't want to have to refresh our page every single time we delete a comment. And to do that, it's actually not that hard. The reason for that is because we're going to use the same kind of idea, the same thing that we did with the set comments. We're going to mutate our comment state by changing the list. So the same thing we did with the add comments, but the difference is that we're now deleting one element instead of adding an element to our comments list, right? So to do that, it's actually going to be a bit harder because we're going to be using a function in JavaScript called filter. And if you're not familiar with that, I have a video on like explaining the filter function, but honestly, it is a very important function in JavaScript that I would recommend taking a look before trying to fully understand what I'm going to do here. It's not going to be overcomplicated. It's just that if I have a list and I want to be able to remove an item, all I do is I just come over here and say set comments. Then I'm going to grab the comments list and apply the filter function. And then each comment in the comments list will have a value, right? So what I do is I just basically have to pass some sort of check inside of here to determine if we want to keep that comment in our comments list or not. So the check that we want to make is we only want to keep that comment in our comments list if its ID isn't equal to the ID that we're trying to delete. So in the filter function, all we do is we say return and we pass that boolean, right? I only want to keep those comments that have the val.id. So val basically represents each comment in the list, right? So it's just looping through the list of comments and just grabbing each comment through this variable val. So we're just asking if val.id is not equal to the ID that we're trying to delete that we pass in this function, then we want to keep it. If it is, then don't keep it in our in our comments list. So with this logic, what we can do is I'm going to add a new comment here. And you'll see that it appears here, and also if I refresh my page, it's still here. But if I click on the delete button, it should have deleted, but it didn't. Let me look at my inspect element. Yeah, it didn't, but it should have. If I refresh the page, it works. I'm going to take a look to see why this happened. Okay, guys, so I realized what the mistake is, and I don't know why it took me so long to understand this. But basically, and also it's the same reason why it didn't alert the message earlier. So technically, it's not even getting to this point because this request is never finishing. And that's it. This is a mistake that a lot of people do in the beginning, and they do it later on as well. As you can see, I forgot this. Basically, in our comments route over here, we destroy the comment, but we never set any response to this delete request. So what is happening is we're making the request and it's just going on forever. So, and also I forgot to await this request to our database. We always want to keep this asynchronous. So over here at the end, I'll just return back some sort of message saying I don't know, deleted successfully. I don't even know if that's right, but basically we're just setting a response, right? So if I add a new comment over here, such as a new comment, and I refresh the page just to show you guys that it's the same comment, I can just delete it and it works perfectly because we're just filtering through our comments list and removing the same item that we want to delete. So that's the basic idea. We added 3 new functionalities in this video. We're now able to log out from our application. We're able to see our username and have access to our username whenever we want, and at the same time we're also able to delete comments that are that were made by us. So we did a lot in this video. Next video, I'm pretty sure we're going to be working with adding a liking system to each post, and yeah, I'm really excited for that. So that's basically it. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like down below and comment what you want to see next. Subscribe because I'm posting 3 times a week and I would massively appreciate it. And yeah, that's basically it. Really hope you guys enjoyed it, and I see you guys next time.